Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. We are doing a bit of a fun fold card today. Now, I am just going to start off with a regular piece of cardstock here and cut it down in half like usual so that I have created a 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock, and then I score it down the middle so it becomes a 4.25 by 5.5 inch card base. However, we are adding to this today, and this card is sort of a crossover between it's got a folding flap, but it's almost a tri-fold card, I would say, somewhere in between, I guess. And so this is just a really fun one. I'm going to show you how we put a couple of different elements together. Usually I say that things that coordinate all come in the same pack, that's going to be a really safe way to go, but today we are branching out, which is good because being a little bit out of our comfort zone is great. Now I'm going to add a smaller flap, so to speak, on this one, and so it doesn't really matter the size of it. It can be whatever height you want, but I always make it 4.25 across, and then I add a little flap there that we're going to adhere on, so I usually do about 1/2 inch for that, but if you've got a scrap piece and it ends up being less, then so be it, or if it ends up being more, that's fine too. So this is how the card is going to close. This is what we are aiming for. So really we just want some background images and then a nice focal point on that folding flap. So speaking of, I'm going to be using this one today. This is the Peony Rose Stem by Lisa Horton. I just really like this one. I've used this quite a bit. It's an older one of hers, but I have just been in to check and it is still available, so I will link it down below as well for you. Now this one comes with a cutting die, which is very cool. Now lots of hers, not all of them, but lots of the embossing folders do come with these, and I find it easiest to cut them out first and then emboss. However, we're going to do a little step before we get there. There is actually some gorgeous stencils that go along with these, and I think there's sort of 5 or 6 in the set, and you can do beautiful, beautiful layered stenciling. However, I'm doing the cheats version today, mainly because I find it quicker, and I do love a good shortcut. So what I'm going to do before I run it through the embossing folder, so at the moment this is just a plain flat die cut, I'm going to add like what I call a base layer of color. Now I only want to use 2 colors, like 2 greens and 2 purples, just because I like to keep it simple. So I'm going in with a bit of Twisted Citron here. It might have a little bit of color from a previous ink pad on there because I just have 1 dauber per color family, and I am blocking it off just using some mint tape, which is just a low tack tape, and just so that I can do purple up the top without getting the 2 mixed in. I'm trying to keep them really nice and separate and keep everything clean here. And for this one I'm going to use Shaded Lilac. Again, you can see it's clearly got, I think it's got some Wilted Violet there on the previous dauber, so I am just going to, it's probably not exactly true to color, but that's okay, I'm not stressed about it. I'm just putting in a really light version of the Shaded Lilac, or a really light color of that purple. Again, this is just going to be the base layer. I'm going to take off those little pieces there. We've got everything pretty covered. I missed a tiny wee spot. And then I'm going to take the embossing folder that came with this one, and I'm going to line this up. So I just hold the image, make sure it's perfectly lined up so it's going to catch all of the right embossing parts. Now, as I said, there is a whole pack of stencils that you can color this with, but honestly it sometimes feels like just another expense, and that's one of the reasons I do like these cut and embossers, and that they come in one package. You're buying one product essentially, and so I just go with that. That's plenty for me. This is Mowed Lawn, and I've just got a bit of a close-up. You can see I'm just hitting the tops of the embossing and really just keeping it to the centers there. And then this one is Seedless Preserves, and if you go over just nice and light, honestly just hold the ink blender or makeup brush or whatever you're using, just hold it just above the image and just let it glide over top, because we just want to catch those raised portions of the embossing folder. And so that's what gives us that definition between the background color and the color that we are adding on top. And you can see I've just done a little bit of masking just to make sure I don't hit that green down the bottom, but look how gorgeous this looks, and this was fast. Now, I am using Botanical Memories. Now, you can see that the purples in here, sort of match the purple of the flower that I've used. I'm not getting too worried about it. Sometimes it's best not to get hung up on the finer details. And so I'm going to use some of the purple from this Ombre paper pad Do you know what? I purchased this thinking, I purchased it for a specific project. I did the project and then I sort of thought, yeah, I think I'll find ways to use that. I can think of a few. Well, I must admit it's been pretty much featuring in every project because it just has a whole range of colours, and I love the sort of different gradient, the ombre, different colours within each colour, if that makes sense. So I've been really enjoying it, far more than I thought I would. I knew I would use it, but actually it's becoming my grab, it's my go-to. So this is going to be the purple background layer here, and then I'm going to add in the more patterned piece that is going to be on top. Now, some of you may like to do some extra stamping. You might like to leave a space where a secondary sentiment could go, something like that you might want to do on here. And so that is one option that you could also, instead of using the pattern paper, just have a clear, or like a white piece of paper or something lighter, a light pink or a lighter purple, that someone would be able to write over, or you could stamp over. But for me, I'm keeping it simple. There is heaps of room inside this trifold card that we are able to do the writing, so I'm really not going to leave space for that. I have all my layers pretty much trimmed on my Spellbinders Guillotine, and we are good to go. So I'm going to use some art glitter glue. This is just a really strong liquid adhesive. I also really like my Ranger Multimedium in the matte finish. I think that one has a lot more wiggle room, but I'm always going to use up the things that I purchase, otherwise it just becomes a waste. And so this one is fine. It grabs very fast, and sometimes that can be handy, and sometimes you can, want a moment longer. So you can see that there is a little join there. It's actually not that easy to see, but there is a flap obviously, and so I'm going to cover that up with a matting layer and then a white layer, and then this is where I am going to write, or someone who was gifting the card, but this one I ended up using, so this is where I wrote my message. And it does give the card plenty of stability, given that it's got an extra arm coming out the side too. And remember, that arm actually doesn't touch the ground, so to speak. When it's standing, it still stands beautifully, but remember that that arm isn't the full length, so the little bit of extra stability in the card is perfect too. Then I add on these matting layers. Everything is coming together very easy once you have a few of them good to go. Now, I always work on with the matting layers, I pretty much do 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch smaller, depending on whether you want a larger border or a smaller border. Cut that off the top and one side, and then we're good to go. Then I'm actually going to trim this down a little bit. Obviously it's a little too big for what I needed. I was actually planning on just taking out that sort of middle stem and popping them together like they were always meant to be that way. But then when I popped on the flower just by itself, I actually thought just even one is perfectly fine. So I was happy with this. I like that it also provides a little bit of texture to the card as well. You can feel with that embossing. I did play around with the idea of adding on that extra flower head down in a corner, but actually in the end I ended up adding it inside of the card, but I didn't think of that till after filming. So I was just going to leave it off. But anyhow, I popped it on the inside, and then using this Tim Holtz little sticker book here, I have added on a nice wee quote. And this is quite cool because you can customize it. There are a gazillion words inside of there. I've not looked at it super closely before, but I have just for you. I'm going to sketch a few little lines around these just so they look a little less plonked on there. And then this is our gorgeous, very easy and quick trifold card. The supplies are always listed down below, along with our Facebook group, which is Come Crafting with Natasha, and then you can post your makes over there that were inspired by these videos. But other than that, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.